No, not good night because I'm not quite done. I wanted to finish the metaphysics. Reincarnation. Choose your own adventure when you get up there. You choose for the purpose of completing your soul in some sense. It's kind of like a video game where you're completing your character. Begs some, not begs, evokes some questions. Don't get off on a tangent. Evokes some questions specifically like, well, who is this me that returns to the waiting area to pick out the next life? You know, I look at my own daughter, Delilah, and I see in her soul, quote unquote, um, qualities that are clearly my qualities, and there's obviously a genetic, very strong genetic component in a person's nature. And so it's difficult to understand a conception of me that is stripped of all the identity that comes from my particular genetic string or whatever. So, I mean, that's one problem with that kind of metaphysics, but I think that that's the thing I like about it is that it brings, it hones in on a couple of key questions, right? One being, what is the nature of identity? Which is ultimately where all of my discussion is focused, or my, not discussion, my thinking or whatever, a forthcoming discussion is likely to be focused primarily on identity because here are my concerns. One, I want to understand the extent to which identity is anything other than the words in one's head and the internal data pool that one accesses. It's like, it's very common to think of people as like computers or information processors that move around. And the reason it's popular is because I think it's an extremely apt comparison. And I think to some extent, it explains what's so difficult about getting a hang or handle on consciousness. Because look, I know that we're engaged in, I don't know this at all. I feel that we're engaged, I don't even feel it. Here's an idea. It's like, we use these things like, I know that, I think that, here are some words that have entered, here are words that my head is filled with. That's all. um, we are engaged in some sort of puzzle completion process. We are still just getting only, and the thing is, we have a collective consciousness. I'm not talking about, Jungian collective unconscious nonsense, but we have a collective consciousness. That is to say, obviously the internet, but beyond the internet, we've got a shared set of known things about the universe and consensus sentences about which we have consensus. So some of them are moral, like, it is wrong to kill toddlers or something. Pretty much universal consensus on that, right? You won't find very many people advocating the random murder of toddlers. as a demographic. I mean, you might find plenty of groups who advocate functionally for killing toddlers because they think we should bomb those people there or these people here and some toddlers amongst them. But you probably won't hear, I don't think, anybody publicly saying, my position is toddlers are fair game. They should be hunted. Nobody's going to say that, right? So, okay, so there's a consensus position we can refer to. It's a consensus position on a moral issue, on what one ought to do. So, that's part of our identity, in the sense that it's part, and it's a part of our of identity that each of us share. It's like a driver, right? Like we all have this Windows driver in us. Our computers look way different, and we got way different programs and a lot of different stuff. We do share some basic operating system, driver, necessity type things. Conceptions of morality being some of the drivers that necessarily emerged from necessity, right? Like, if you think back before people knew anything beyond their immediate world around them, when they lived in a world with very few symbols, where writing was rare. In that world, people shared fewer abstract foundationals, abstract fundamentals, and to the extent that they did share them, they shared for less large geographic areas and for smaller percentages, smaller shares of the overall population. A la Tower of Babel kind of thing, like in the olden days, we may have had approximately the same number of languages, but fewer people were bilingual, or for a smaller percentage of the population was bilingual, and yada yada yada. So, back in the olden days, without a bunch of text, people interpreted their experiences through the memes they had in place, like everything's all about Jesus in the Middle Ages because that's what they had. They got like one book, Hey, we got the Bible. I'm going to the library, Maud. Let's see what they got. What'd you bring back? The Bible. Again? Still the only book they have. It's really good, though. Yeah, I mean, but look, if that's the only book you have, then everything gets filtered through that, right? Like, that reminds me of that one part of the Bible when Jesus said, yeah. Oh, well, that reminds me of the other part of the Bible. Blah, 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 blah. I mean, the dominance of a given reference point like that and the corresponding shaping of what a life is, it it what? Well, I don't remember where I was going with that. Anyway, you've got a circumstance where people are, to a large extent, their internal narratives and their primary directives, so to speak. It's like this. I think what we're working out is a great big puzzle whereby It's basically axiomatic reasoning, whereby you work up from certain axioms that get settled upon, and it kind of like triggers a slowly increasing in speed domino kind of a thing. And the reason it does that is because, look, when I'm talking about axioms here, I don't mean axioms in the philosophical sense of things that are inherently a priori true, or the one assumption we're going to make in order to build the whole system up. But what I'm saying is there are certain things that we all agree on. So whether you are a super conservative or a super liberal, it's not socially acceptable. It would be considered vulgar. You'd be shamed if you don't agree, at least that, black people shouldn't be summarily executed by the police. It's like the conservatives may argue that every single specific case is not that. But what you won't hear the conservatives ever saying anymore is that it's okay if it is that, right? We agree it's not okay for the police to use excessive force, but we're going to define excessive force as basically, he has to be beating an unconscious man for an hour before it's excessive force or something like that, and we're going to say every specific instance isn't excessive force, but we won't argue that it's okay to use violence against black people just because they're black people, right? Conservatives won't argue that. And the reason they won't argue that is because they would be ashamed, right? They would be shamed by their peers. They might be able to argue those things in very insular company, but that's the reality that we're engaged in right now, is this de-insularization of everything, because globalization, the world's getting smaller, information moves more quickly. When I'm engaging in conversations about what's true or what's right, it's almost always through analogy, or let's just say analogy. But it typically takes the form of this: we both agree that blah 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 is wrong in blah 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 context, and this other context seems to be very very similar, blah 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 to blah blah blah. So why is this one not okay and this one is okay? Those sort of questions end up winning. Like, not just winning the argument. Who cares about that? Who cares about having an internet fight and winning the fight? I do. Sometimes, I guess. I don't even know why I have internet fights. It's like fun. It's just like fun to do it. I'm kind of like one of those guys who you wouldn't guess from these videos, which are very, leisurely paced, and not audience friendly, but like one of those guys who practices with swords a lot and can make them go around super fancy. And I like doing it, I go, ooh, I'm slick, or whatever. But I don't really care, I guess, about winning the internet fights. I just care. In fact, when I do get beat, every once in a while, like Wheeler beat me. Fucking Wheeler. Yeah, he's a deadly opponent. When I do get beat, I think it's great, because it's whatever happened, they were pretty slick. And I don't think it's great if I fucked it up. I just went stupid. But anyway, we're out of time. Goodbye.